Vanessa Goertzen. I am here to talk about my book Charm School, 18 Quilts from 5-Inch Squares. It's with C&T Publishing, and just a little bit about myself. I design fabric for Moda. I have a pattern company called Lella Boutique, and I love working with pre-cuts. And in fact, I remember the first time that I ever saw a Moda charm pack. It was 7 years ago. And I remember it well because I was pregnant at the time, and I had just found out at my ultrasound appointment that I was having a girl. And so naturally, I went right to my local quilt shop to pick out a few fat quarters. And as I was getting ready to check out, I saw these amazing little pre-cut bundles of 5-inch squares. And I had no idea what I was going to do with them, but I just knew that I had to take them home with me and see what I could come up with. Now, even though the book was inspired by Moda pre-cut charm squares, you can use anything in your stash for the pattern. All the patterns have been written so that you can use fat quarters or scraps or charm packs. But there's also a conversion chart so you can use anything in your stash. So I intended this book to be a great primer of 5-inch squares for any skill level, but especially beginners. So rather than just being a book of patterns, I really wanted this to have lessons in each chapter. So as you open up to each chapter, you'll find an illustration of the technique that's going to be used within each chapter. In chapter 1, the focus is on keeping the 5-inch square as it is. So what I started with was a basic block quilt, perfect for any beginner. But what I wanted to do was see how I could make this a little bit special for any skill level or taste. So what I've done is I've focused on fabric selection, fabric placement, and then the finishing touches. As you can see, there's some beautiful custom quilting by Natalia Bonner, and it really takes this quilt from being a beginner quilt to a masterpiece. In chapter 2, we look at what happens when we cut a 5-inch square in half. You get rectangles. And so what I wanted to look at was sort of the traditional idea of doing a coin quilt, but I've made it into an individual block. And in the center of each, you have this little square as sort of a depot. So this quilt is called Railroad Crossing, and it's perfect for a beginner. In that same chapter, I wanted to show just what great ideas you could do with just rectangles and squares. So I came up with a snowflake block, and this quilt is called Snowfall. In chapter 3, I wanted to begin to introduce triangles, and I know that that can be scary for beginners because I've heard that from them. So what I did is I came up with this quilt pattern that's behind me. It's called Scrap Happy, and in order to ease a beginner into the easy corner triangle method, we're just using the triangles in the sashing here for these little sawtooth stars. It's great for anybody, and it's a good scrap buster as well. In that chapter, we will also learn about making flying geese, which is such a traditional block, and you'll see a few quilts using those. And then the final quilt in the chapter is called Madam Butterfly, and it uses that same beginner technique, but as you can see, there are some really impressive shapes that we can start to make using that same beginner technique. In chapter 4, we'll look at individual triangle units or half square triangles. So the example that I brought with me today is called Hoodwink, and this not only uses a half square triangle method, but it uses that easy corner triangle method from the previous chapter. And so you'll notice throughout the book that we build upon all of the techniques used in previous chapters. Now, chapter 5 is about what happens when we take those half square triangles one step further and make quarter square triangles. So what we have here is my somersault quilt, and it uses the Day Sale fabric by Bonnie and Camille for Moda. And as you can see, we've got these cute little quarter square triangles here in the center. Finally, for the last chapter, we look at wonky cuts and the sort of things that we can do with our charm squares. So I started out with a 9 patch, and then we make some wonky cuts along with our background print and mix and match them to get this overall look. I'm so excited to be talking with you about my love of 5-inch squares in my new book, and thank you so much for watching.